Most people will spend their entire lives chasing money, but they won't ask themselves this simple question. What actually is money, right? We're constantly asking questions like, how do I accumulate more money? How do I save my money? How do I invest my money? How do I spend my money in the best way? But no one will ever ask, what is money? What is this thing that I'm saving my time and energy in and working for? What is it? How does it work? How was it created? What is it backed by, right? How is it distributed to people? People never ask this question. And we should be asking ourselves, what are the properties of a sound money, right? Why is our money just losing, 3 to 8% or whatever it is of its value every year? And why are we just accepting of that? Why is that just the reality? Is there some sort of alternative to that monetary system? Is it better to have money that's easy to create and can be created out of thin air? Or is it better to have a form of money that can't be printed and that is hard to create, right? That's an important distinction. The dollar, the yen, the Canadian dollar, whatever it is that you are working for and saving in, why is it this way, right? Most people, you'd be surprised at how many people I've talked to that don't know the dollar isn't backed by gold anymore. They still think the dollar is backed by the gold that the U.S. government has in Fort Knox. They don't know that the money has no real physical backing to it, and there's no limit to how many can be created, and it's designed to go down in value forever. Gold was the best expression of sound money in the past because it was hard to create and find more of. So it was a good store of value, and then it could be created down into coins. So it was, in more ancient times, it was a better exchange of value. Now in a digital age, it's a very bad transfer of value. It can be a good store of value, but not necessarily when it doesn't serve the purpose of being a medium of exchange, right? So money, you boil down to a definition, money is or should be a store of value and a medium of exchange in a unit of account, right? So it should be a unit of account, as in it's a measuring stick to measure the value of things. As we know, fiat currencies have been a very bad measuring stick because that measuring stick is constantly shrinking. So it looks like everything is getting more expensive or more valuable, when reality, the measuring stick we're using to measure those things is just shrinking. And then it should be a store of value, meaning if you save your money for the future, it should buy you at least close to as many goods and services as it did, in the past, which we know fiat currency fails as a store of value because it loses 3 to 10% of its value every year, especially in years of crisis that have warranted or justified the government to create new units of currency. Those years, the inflation has been especially bad, which is where I get that 3 to 10%, because it can be much worse than the stated inflation goals. And inflation can be even worse than CPI as well. CPI is usually how inflation is measured, but that measurement it takes a hand-picked, selected basket of goods to demonstrate inflation over time. But that figure can be manipulated by swapping different types of goods in to make inflation look not as bad as it is in reality. Again, so that's where Bitcoin comes in, right? Bitcoin is a form of money created in 2008, 2009, where the supply is fixed, right? So it's of money that can't be printed out of thin air. No one can shut it down. No one can censor or stop your transactions. And it can be sent anywhere globally without permission, right? So Bitcoin is this new expression of money. And like I said, most people will spend thousands, tens of thousands of hours of their life making money, right? Trying to make the most money that they can with their time. But so if you're watching this, then your mission should be not just how do I accumulate more money, but spend a fraction of the hours that you spend making money learning about what money is and what makes a good, solid foundation for money. I feel like a broken record sometimes on this channel, but I just think these ideas are incredibly important, and I just find it alarming that people today still don't question these things and still, think the dollar's backed by gold. And so when the dollar was backed by gold, we had some kind of physical constraint, right? So a fiat currency is a currency that is backed solely by trust and faith in the issuer of that currency. On a gold standard, you have some kind of physical law restraining and disciplining the issuer of the money, right? So if you have a currency backed by gold, you need a certain amount of gold as reserves to issue more dollars. On a fiat standard, you trust that the government won't print all the money out of thin air and devalue the dollar to being worthless, which, again, the dollar has lost 98% of its value since the Federal Reserve and central banking started in the US. So that would be a bad bet to bet that governments won't debase your savings and make your savings worth a lot less. So on the gold standard, nature is backing the money, which is just ironic when people say Bitcoin is backed by nothing, when the dollar is actually backed by nothing, and Bitcoin is backed by energy and backed by the largest distributed computing network on the planet, right? That's what it's backed by. It's backed by the fact that all these participants in the network agree to run the Bitcoin software and enforce the rules of the network, right? They agree to keep a history of all transactions on the Bitcoin blockchain. And if someone wants to send a Bitcoin transaction, they have to broadcast it to the network. And then the validators in the network then have to verify this transaction is valid and that the person trying to spend this Bitcoin actually owns the Bitcoin, and it matches up with the complete history of transactions since Bitcoin started. So it's just ironic when people say Bitcoin isn't backed by anything. It's really a meaningless kind of refute. But yeah, like I didn't learn any of this stuff like in school or growing up, right? In history classes. It was just the dollar is money. It is what it is. Fiat currency. And a lot of it is justified by the kind of this Keynesian model of economics that basically says you need to expand the supply of money for the economy to function, and people who save money are hoarders and they need to spend their money to stimulate the economy. While that is true in a fiat economy, right, because you need to keep constantly expanding the supply of money so you can devalue the debt and keep this fiat system alive, right? It doesn't have to be that way. We can use sound money because sound money respects our hard work, because no man or woman should work for what someone else can print, right? It's just that simple, really. Why would you want to save your hard work and try to save for the future in something that can be printed out of thin air for zero cost, right? It's a simple, intuitive realization, but when you realize it, it'll change how you view money and how you view the world and history and philosophy and all these things, because it's so fundamental, because this fiat money just distorts outcomes. It distorts everything, right? Everything's just getting more expensive. Why is that? Well, it's this guy's fault. It's this company's fault. Blame him, blame her. It's the fact that money is created out of thin air and the money loses its value. So we're measuring the same fixed thing in a measuring stick that gets smaller. It's really that simple. And it's intended to be overly complicated so you don't understand it or question it, but it's really that simple. What would you rather save in? Something created out of nothing, or something that is incredibly hard to create and impossible to recreate and fake? So some people think Bitcoin can be shut down, or that someone can just create a new, better Bitcoin. It doesn't work like that because of the network effect of Bitcoin. I think people just see Bitcoin as just an orange coin that exists on the internet, right? It's just this thing that you buy and you sell and you hope to make money. It's a network. Bitcoin is a monetary network. It's the largest distributed computing network in the world. right? That's what Bitcoin is backed by. It's backed by its network. It's backed by the fact that it's expensive and difficult to create new Bitcoin, to bring Bitcoin into existence, but that's what backs it. That's what makes the network secure, and the fact that you can feel safe saving in this currency because no one can recreate it or manipulate it or destroy it. That's about it for this video. Thank you so much for watching and the support on the channel. Let me know if you have any questions or suggestions for a future video. But yeah, that was the question that people don't ask themselves. So if you're watching, think about money, think about the origins and the history of it, and I think your perspective will change, as mine has too. So that's about it. As always, together, let's work, save, and build a brighter future with Bitcoin. I'll see you in the next video.